Disciple, the fact that it won the best screenplay at one of the top three festivals, whether it's Berlin, Cannes, or in Venice. Were you disappointed that Disciple was not India's entry to the Oscars?
Yes and no. It pissed me off and it disappointed me. So almost 20 years since an Indian film had played at either of the three big festivals.
Collaboration with Quaron, right? I mean, were you part of when he was making Roma? Is that what he was shooting at the time?
Yeah, I was on the sets of Roma during the shoot, during the post-production, and seeing them at work in that zone is just not something you can trade with anything else.
Firstly, congratulations on everything, actually. I know that we obsess over awards in general, and we obsess over international film festival awards. And the fact that, your film, Disciple, the fact that it won the best screenplay, it was in competition. In fact, I don't even remember, Chaitanya, if there is any film, to the best of my memory, that's been in competition at one of the top three festivals, whether it's Berlin, Cannes, or in Venice, of course. Do you know of any film that was competing over the past few years, or have you?
No, it was kind of a big moment for Indian cinema because it was the first film after Monsoon Wedding, actually.
Right.
So, which was back in 2001. So almost like it was 20 years since an Indian film had played at either of the three big festivals in the main competition. So it was a big moment for not just us, but I guess for Indian cinema in some way as well.
Right. I mean, and of course, like with a film like yours, it really helps from a global perspective, of course, but even from an Indian perspective. I mean, people will look at it in a certain prism. They've already been told that this is a film to look out for, which is the lead up to when it drops on Netflix. And the other one, of course, Chaitanya, is the collaboration with Quaron, right? I mean, that's another thing. I mean, I know that you were in the mentorship program with him. Were you part of while he was working as well? Like when he was making Roma? Is that what he was shooting at the time? When you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on the sets of Roma during the shoot, during the post-production, and that's where the proof of the pudding is basically watching him at work. You can have all the conversations in the world and you can analyze someone's work, but seeing them at work in that zone is just not something you can trade with anything else. And it was an absolutely amazing honor and privilege to be part of the making of a film like Roma,
Right.
And was such an education. And also, in a way, my first time on a film set outside of the two films that back then I'd only made quotes and one short film. So it was literally my only time because I haven't assisted anybody on a set. But I do feel because of that experience that I'm 3 films old and not 2 films old in my head.
So how did that process work? Were you just following him around as a student, or what are the things that you said to him during the filming of Roma as a feedback?
Yeah, no. So the thing is that this is not a program where you assist somebody. It's a dialogue between two creators. Just that one artist happens to be a lot more accomplished and at a different phase in their career. So I wasn't like there as an intern or as a student or as an assistant, and he was always generous enough to call me a friend. And he always maintains that this is a circular conversation in the sense that I got to be a part of his project when he was making it, and he got to be part of this project when he was making it. So I was just there as a bouncing board and as an observer, but again, I was privileged and I was spoiled. I was the only one who had read the script. The entire cast and crew of the film had not read the script. I was the only one, I think, in the world at that point who had read the script. I was the only one who was allowed to sit at a monitor. Nobody was allowed to even see the monitor. It was a super secretive kind of a project. So it was great fun, man. It was great.
Is there anything by way of a feedback that you remember that perhaps got incorporated in Roma by the end of it?
Yeah, I remember there was some scene he was shooting and he was doing it in a certain way, and I asked him like, why are you doing it in this way? Because the rest of the film has this, and he didn't say much at that point, and then he changed something, in the scene, and then he cut and he said, "Your questions really make me think." Like your questions trip me up. So yeah, there are those moments, and then just generally you would be like, "What do you think? Which one should we go for?" Those kind of things. But I just tried to be out of his way,
So,
tried to be out of the way of everybody on set. I was super careful, super paranoid, even about like knocking over a light or something. No, I really tried to make myself as invisible as possible and be a fly on the wall and just soak it all
no,
in rather
which
than trying to make my presence felt there, you
sure,
know.
but which scene was this, Chaitanya?
I don't remember. I
Oh,
don't remember the scene, but also what would happen is, see, he is actually quite fascinated by magic because I do magic. So there were times where his producer had to drag him, off his chest, like you wasted your lunch break. People are waiting on set for you to shoot, and you guys are doing like some magic conversation here. So
so
those are some
was
fond
it a
memories.
conversation, or were you actually carrying like your
I
box
was
of tricks?
no, I don't do the kind of magic where I have to
Okay,
carry like props. No, I was performing for him. Yeah,
right,
he's like
amazing.
show me more. Yeah, because it's also like I think any film lover, any filmmaker would be
Hmm.
fascinated by the subject if you really get into it.
Right.
It's very close to cinema that way, and he is a magician. I think so.
Truly, truly. And a lot of that can be said about you, Chaitanya. Of course, second film as good as the first film, which is a very tough act to follow for most people in that profession. But one of the things that I thought, you would go through after Court. I mean, of course, there was this film that everyone watched and were totally blown away by it, including me, of course, as a movie buff. And one of the first things I thought, because that was 2014, if I'm not mistaken, is when everyone
Yeah,
watched it for
yeah,
the first time.
yeah.
15, 16, 17, 18. Now, when you make a debut of that nature, I'm pretty sure all through that time, all those years, anybody who met you would just ask, "What are you up to next?" Right? Did that
And
happen a lot? Was it pissing you off?
it was not pissing me off. I would blame myself for being so slow.
Okay,
I mean, people are asking out of goodness. They're asking because they're curious, they're excited. It's better to be asked that question
then
than
not.
nobody caring
Right.
about what you're doing. So it wasn't more about being pissed off, but I was really pissed at myself
Hmm.
because I was taking so much time to write the script. But now that I've gone through it, I know that it takes the time it takes. This was a subject which is an endless ocean of a
Hmm.
field.
Right.
It's got so many complexities. It's got so many, and there was no point in doing something that's like Indian classical music 101 or an outsider's exotic game.
Right.
I
Right.
had to really go deep. And also, I enjoyed the process. I
Hmm.
enjoyed the time that I spent on the post production of the film or the prep. Or so once I started working, it was all fine. It didn't matter. It took 4 years.
Right.
But that waiting period and when you're deciding or when you're not getting somewhere, that's when it gets a bit frustrating and you feel like an imposter.
Right.
And it's a process. I'm still feeling it again now. So
What I find interesting about your process, and it's very similar to a journalistic process in the sense that's really
yeah,
what journalists do to an extent, where they have no idea about about the field that when they start out writing about it. And usually for journalists, for instance, there is a trigger point. There's something that they heard, and then thereafter they get into that world. Like I had no idea that you were completely a newbie to the court and the judicial system when you were making court, and likewise with Hindustani classical music when you were making. Was there a trigger point for both those films? Something that you saw that led you to that world?
yeah, I think there was a more definite trigger point for court.
Okay.
What had happened was I'd heard a story of somebody who had gone to the police station and they were, I guess, wrongly arrested and they
Hmm.
needed a printout to prove something. And they told me that the police guys couldn't hook the printer in for like the longest time and they didn't know how to take a printout. Okay. And then I was watching a typical American courtroom drama at
Hmm.
some point where like the lawyers were like super articulate and dramatic and fighting for justice. And I was like, man, how would a real Indian courtroom be like? And then
Hmm.
just thought of this policeman not trying to like get a printout but not happening. So I was like, what if I make a Bong Joon-ho courtroom drama
Hmm.
in a lower court of Mumbai full of chaos? So it
Right.
almost started off as a comedy.
Right.
So that was my trigger point
Hmm.
for court. For the disciple, I think I know my entry point. I don't know my trigger point. My entry point was all these kissas that you hear. These
Hmm.
anecdotes about musicians that once
Hmm.
this happened, and some of them are really fantastical in nature.
Hmm.
Like modern day mythology type,
Right.
uh, and secret rags and crazy amounts of practice. So that was my entry point. The stories sucked me in,
Right.
and then I started discovering the music. So
Right. Right. I mean, what I also find interesting about the film is that you're dialectical about it. While it is about Guru Shishya, there is a long sequence where you question it. You question this bhakti. How much of it is mythology? How much of that is real? Is that something that you were conscious of, not to go and get sucked into the same things that your protagonist perhaps could be?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, even when you're researching and when you're
Hmm.
studying something, there is a journey. You are, full of romance in your head. You're
Hmm.
like a fascinated little child
Hmm.
exploring this vast landscape, and then the more you know, the romance kind of gets sucked
Right.
out. It's
Right.
demystified for you completely.
Right. Right.
There's also the demystification that can happen from just knowing the artist rather than limiting yourself to the
True.
art.
Right.
There is
Which
so
is
much.
which is what journalists go through a lot, actually.
Right, right. There is so much respect one can lose and so much contempt that can be
Right.
bred by familiarity. And then, as a writer, you have to infuse that romance back into the work and remind yourself why you were fascinated with this world in the first place. So yeah, there is that kind of a
Right.
graph and a journey. And even though it comes later in the film, that scene, that
Yeah.
was a thought that I knew when I started writing the film, because writing the film was the last thing I did. Like,
Okay.
after 2 years, the writing took 2 months,
Hmm.
or a
Hmm.
month and a half. It's the 2 years to write the first page, when all these questions, all these doubts, the truth and what's not true, and the point and the counterpoint.
Right.
All of that was what
I mean,
killed me.
it's a fascinating process in the sense of, like, would you, for instance, maybe record the pre-production aspect of it, because that could be that behind the scenes could be a documentary film of its own, because you're really serving that world as it exists in reality. Do you have footage like that?
I'll be very honest. We have some footage. We have, which we are not releasing right now because
Hmm.
it's too early. But we have footage of an Aditya who looks very different, 20 kgs heavier than you see him in the first chapter in the film, rehearsing. We have even footage of Sumitra Bhave recording the
Hmm.
voiceover as
Right.
Mai, and we have all those auditions and things. But it's not been documented as thoroughly as it could have. And even though you're right, it's a very, very interesting, a whole different document in itself. My problem is I don't like cameras. I don't like
When you're researching.
people around me. No, yeah, I like the idea of a safe room.
Hmm.
So any kind of an outsider, which is why both my films, they don't have video making of.
Hmm.
There used to be a still photographer on set, but again, that's somebody I'm 100% comfortable with. But I am super finicky and super sensitive about even somebody taking out a cell phone surreptitiously during a meeting or something. So
Get you.
I'm very, very protective about everything that way.
Right, right. No, but what I was talking about really, Chaitanya, is actually things that, because you are as much an outsider to the world as the
Yeah,
audience is, they're also discovering,
yeah,
as you have discovered over 2 years of what you're documenting, right? I mean, for instance, one of the things that I learned through your film is the idea of age, and that at the age of 40 is when they really become of any
yeah,
worth in this
yeah.
field, which I find really odd, because if it's really as old a field as it is, Chaitanya, I mean, mortality rates are pretty low back then. So, I mean, when you're saying 40, it's not the same as 40 now. It would be like
Yeah,
when you're going to only live till 50, right?
yeah, yeah. But there you hear stories about, swamis and saints who are hundreds of years old. And no, but it's true. Even
Right.
even then, really, a lot of the great musicians became well known in India at a much later age. And look at how long some of them have gone on to live.
Right. That's true.
90 years old
Yeah.
and 88 years old, uh, and it's also just the amount of time that takes for you to. It's a field where it's very hard to be overrated.
Right.
You can choose to go in a different direction and do something with your talent that people might judge,
Hmm.
but to be well regarded in the first place, it's
Right.
very hard to be a fluke in
Right.
that sense, on a pan India level, and especially before the internet and things like that. So it's a bit like politics. Even in
Hmm.
politics, like you're young at 40.
Right. Right. That is
you know
true.
you, you So it's a bit like that. Yeah, you just
Right.
need some amount of experience there, I guess.
I mean, another thing that I learned from your film, Chaitanya, is, I mean, you touch upon it, but I mean, not necessarily in vocalizing it in so many words. But you're looking at patronage also, the fact of patronage, right? And how important that becomes for a field of this nature, which is, you need to, need to get into depth of it. You need people who will allow you that space. And there were these princely states. And so you talk of Alwar Gharana in the film, but Alwar would have been a princely state. And I guess there would have been state patronage for that particular form to exist. Is that something that's really killed classical music, you think, in a certain sense, the fact the patronage left and now it's really up to public?
I mean, firstly, the Alwar Gharana is a fictitious
Of
Gharana.
course.
It's not
Yeah.
a real Gharana. And no, I think we should look at all art forms in the same way, because every art and its discourse has been shaped and dictated almost by the patronage, that funds it. And it's the same for cinema. It's the same for classical music. That how the patronage has changed, where the funding comes from,
Right.
also dictates and guides the way the music is produced, or what what the music is. Tell you that classical music is not dying. There is a perception that even I had from the outside that, oh, this is a field, this is an art form in danger of extinction, or it's struggling for relevance. No, it's just the noise around it has changed. There's just so much more that's happening now. But if anything, there are now more audiences for the field than ever before, which used to be earlier very meant for a very select audience. It was very classist also in nature as to who could enjoy it. So it's actually quite a thriving subculture.
Right. I'm going to get into some of your filmmaking choices, Chaitanya. And, I think one was just the tone of the film itself. So one is, of course, the tone that you chose in terms of not just the way we look at the film, but also in terms of the writing. Like, there are two, things about music more recent that come to my mind. One is, of course, purely in terms of the subject itself. I mean, we saw this series called Bandish Bandits, right? And Bandish Bandits, and which is a little bit like if you were to even look at something like a Whiplash, where the tone between the guru and the shishya is a really like a aggressive one. It's like a drama between these two. Is that something you're conscious of, that's not the area that you want to go into, because that could well be the story you could have told, because there is a lot of oppression and tyranny in Guru Shishya from what we understand of it, right?
I started working on this film like in 2016, so I've
Right.
been working on it for a long time. No, but what I was aware was the general tropes in art and cinema about artists, about any kind of a master disciple sort of relationship, and or even about classical music, about musicians being serious, about them being so intense and reverent. And I didn't want to start there. Those deviations are also based in truth for me. You realize they're human beings like you and me.
Right.
They also have that downtime. I realized that, be it any artist, be it a musician, be it a magician, be it a ballerina, they are normal human beings, who have their downtime, who have their contradictions, who have their temptations. And it's not this perception of and which is why in the film, even in the journey of an artist, there is no extreme success, there is no extreme tragedy that's happening with the guy. So there are a lot of those things, because also for me, that's what real life is like. We don't all end up superstars or drunk on the road,
Right.
We all adapt to a situation. There's so many grays between the black and white that's made out to be. So that's what I wanted to, and that's where I come from,
Right. I mean,
my choices.
So roughly, because it doesn't reflect the truth, you wouldn't, for instance, go for a hero's journey. Because it's not like this guy's gonna like eventually end up as this person who takes over from, and that was a conscious choice you're making, because that doesn't reflect the truth as we see it.
No, but when I say truth, I mean my own truth, my personal truth, what I relate to and what I observe. And even if the hero's journey is the truth, I'm nobody to deny or say that it does not have any truth to it. It comes from a certain place. It comes from thousands of years of mythology and folk tales. But it's also, for me personally, become very boring and predictable to watch that story. I mean, we've had enough of it now.
True.
What's the point of watching a movie where from the first scene I know how it's going to end?
Right.
So it's not the story that I want to tell.
Right.
I mean, and also, there is, I feel, too much focus on the hero, on a conquest-driven journey, on achievement, on success. This discourse that if you try hard enough and if you believe in yourself, you're going to get it. No, it's not true. It's not true for 99% of us.
Right.
People who work for us, people who clean our toilets have dreams and aspirations, but they have zero social upward mobility.
True.
So it's just not true. So you know what I
Right.
mean? So I'm
Right.
interested in stories that I find to be resonating and truthful to my culture, my society, our context, as a country, and also stories that probably deserve to be told but haven't been told,
Right. Right.
which kind of deviate from the formula but yet come across as relatable.
True, true. I mean, talking about where you come from, Chaitanya, in terms of you're a full-on Bombay boy. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah,
it's the city you've grown up in, is the city that you've captured twice on screen. I think the Bombay I saw in The Disciple is very different from the Bombay I've seen in most films, and it seemed like a conscious choice you made as well. I mean, this is a quieter Bombay. The roads don't have as many people, and especially that the scene that the motif that you use of the protagonist on the bike, and the music that sort of goes with the pace of the bike's movement, and there's quietness and there's a mental solidity. I mean, was that again a conscious thing that you had in mind when you set out, and what was the reason behind it?
yeah, because there are a few different things that work on a story level, a narrative level. It's set in a period, right? The
Hmm.
film starts off in 2006,
Right.
right? And it's a very different Bombay from a Bombay of 2021.
Right.
Okay. Also, it's a city which Sharad has been born and raised in, and it's a city that's full of possibilities for him at that point.
Hmm.
And the night becomes this haven, this cocoon where he doesn't have to confront reality, doesn't
Hmm.
have to confront real life and practical challenges and logistical obstacles that stand in his way.
Right.
And also, I must tell you that that is Mumbai still.
Right.
If you go for a drive, I mean, not now, but one of my favorite things to do before the lockdown was to go for long drives at 3 or 4 in the morning with a friend of mine because I don't drive. Uh, this is Mumbai still. But of
Right.
course, we've done some little sorcery and we've chosen locations carefully also to depict the period. But if you see, the city starts getting noisier, the city starts
Right.
getting more modern and starts getting more dynamic and starts closing in on the character as his journey progresses. Because it's a great city, it's one of the great cities of the world, but it's not an easy city to
Right.
navigate.
Right. Do you bike around though, Chaitanya?
No, yeah, I don't bike, I don't drive a car, I'm a total wimp.
No, the reason I'm asking is like the whole idea of him having a conversation with himself while he's
Uh,
alone in the bike is also
yeah,
pretty close to reality. A lot of people, a lot of
yeah,
bikers do
yeah,
that when they're
yeah,
by
yeah,
themselves. They can only hear the sound of the machine and their own head.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
also that's also something that you've taken from reality. Would that be correct to
Yeah,
say?
yeah. I mean, I just had to find a motive, or
Hmm.
a way to express it. Like, for example, I walk a lot. I used to walk a
Hmm.
lot on the beach before this lockdown happened. Or even when me and my friend would go for this drive in the car, we
Hmm.
would quite often be very quiet and be in our own thoughts, and or like some old Hindi song is playing in the background, but it puts you in a different mode,
Right.
without all the noise which we are so desensitized to
Right.
and so used to. I don't know if you're in Mumbai still, but
I am. Yeah.
we have become desensitized to the amount of noise and how. And
Right.
also, I'm a night person personally.
Hmm.
From my television days, I acquired this habit of working at night because I
Right.
was forced to back then. But yeah, it's just so quiet, and just you don't have any of the disturbances. So
Right. I mean, that's obviously a technique that you use to get into the character's mind. The
mine,
other technique that you use is the voiceover of the
yeah,
great person whose recordings exist. I mean, she passed away recently. I
yeah.
mean, is there any particular reason why you chose to approach Sumitra Bhave of all the people for that particular voicing, as it were?
I came across an interview of hers and I
Mm,
heard her voice. And this was when I had an idea. I mean, my description in the script was this is the voice of God.
mm, mm.
It has to have that kind of a power and aura to it. And when I heard her voice, I was like, this voice is just so cinematic.
Mm,
It's nothing like the conventional voice that we are used to hearing in voiceovers.
mm.
It's so textured, so unique, and it was also the kind of perfect embodiment of the authoritative, discourses that I had read or heard from musicians.
Right.
And I was like, it would be great if she does this. And she was kind enough to agree, even though she had never done anything like this before. She told me that she'd never acted before. And she was nervous like an actor, while doing it, but she was fantastic. And I remember even after we had done the recording, this is way before we started shooting, because Aditya Modak, the actor, actually kept listening to those tapes for months and months before we started shooting to psych himself out. But even then, I remember just making everyone hear it. I'm like, listen to this, isn't this amazing? And then we, of course, worked on it quite a lot on the sound design level, on the mix level, and created a whole arc and a whole journey where her voice and her character starts getting more and more oppressive and almost tyrannical,
Right.
for Sharad.
Right. I mean, speaking of, and of course, every conversation that we've been having for the past week, 10 days has always been about the departed in some form or the other. I mean, another person who passed away was the activist Veera Satidhar, your lead person in court. How did you meet him? How did you zero in on him as the lead for your film? And that's the image that everyone's going to remember court for the rest of the film's lifetime. And that's the poster. That's the man standing there. That's him. How did you meet him? How did you choose to have him on your film?
Firstly, I would like to say that his passing away has changed my relationship with that film and that poster. He's the face of the film, and I can't look at it the same way anymore. I'm still in shock that he's not with us. We met him because there's a very senior lawyer and activist who had helped us with vetting the script. Her name is Susan Abraham. And we told her, listen, we are looking for this impossible person who has to be Marathi, who has to carry a sense of history of oppression on his face, has to be able to perform, Lok Shahir, like a Lok Shahir and folk song, and should be able to act, and has to be of a certain age. And we are just running into roadblocks after roadblocks, because either they can act, or they can't sing, or they can sing but they cannot act, or they just don't fit the part, or they are so old that they can't take instructions. She's like, why don't you try this? Why don't you meet this, activist, very important activist and intellectual called Veera Satidhar from Nagpur? And I wasn't, I didn't know him. So we called him for an audition, and he was this nice man it looked like he was in his 40s, mustache, black hair, like a nice, gentleman. And we were like, yeah, but he looks nothing like, what we want the character to look like. He's great. His audition was very nice, but yeah, this is not what we're looking for. And then he sent us another picture of him saying, okay, also have a look at this. And we thought he's surely pulling a prank on us. He's surely joking, because this was somebody totally different with a white beard and white long hair and, thick bushy mustache. And I'm like, has he sent us some other picture by mistake, or is he pulling a fast one on us? And so we called him like, are you saying that that's you? He's like, yeah, that's me in another look. And we couldn't believe in our eyes. And then we were like, okay, maybe we have something here.
Right.
But even after that, it was a long journey, because he had to learn, the songs beat by beat, with all the pauses, because we did most of those things in one take, and he had to lip sync, imbibe the spirit of Sambhaji Bhagat. He was acting for the first time, and to sort of, leave aside all the work that you're doing for the anti-caste movement, for your, dissent, and for your magazine, things like that, and to commit yourself to a project like this and carry the burden of it on your shoulders was a big commitment. And I think we were blessed to have it, really.
Right. Chaitanya, I really want to know, and not that it should matter to you, but were you disappointed that the Disciple was not India's entry to the Oscars? In my head, it was the most obvious thing to send because of everything that's happened around the film. Did that really bother? Did that piss you off?
Yes and no. It pissed me off and it disappointed me, like it might have disappointed every other filmmaker who applied for it and who must have felt that, my film should have gone. But at the same time, I don't feel that I need to feel entitled that, it had to be my film. Because again, every filmmaker can think that, that, how dare you not send my film? But this is a question for others to ponder about, because I don't have much of a say. We did what we could, which is to apply.
But now that it matters, I think everyone's going to love the film. Chaitanya, hope to see you again. Take care of yourself. Lovely meeting you.
Thank you. You be safe as well. Thank you so much.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.